After 20 years of service, the CEO fired me and laughed good luck cashing those 50,000 worthless shares. He slid a waiver in front of me. I just slid it back unsigned. The CFO went pale and whispered to the CEO without that signature. The day before they fired me, I was fixing the Gotham coffee machine. Not because it was my job, hell no, but because the new HR girl, who once CC'd her lunch order to the whole company, couldn't figure out how to unclog a K-cup chute. So there I was, in a $12 blazer from Marshall's, with 20 years of operations under my belt, scraping dried Colombian roast out of a plastic pipe, like some caffeinated plumber. As I'm doing that, Gavin, the new CEO, struts by, Bluetooth headset dangling like he's ordering airstrikes, and mutters, "Can we get facilities to handle that?" I didn't look up. If I had, I might have thrown a coffee pot at a soul patch and walked out right then. But no, I just fixed the damn machine, because that's what I'd always done. Quietly, precisely, without drama. I was Dana before Slack channels and rooftop kombucha, was Dana when the company was 4 desks in a strip mall next to a laser tag arena. Back then, I ran the office, stocked printer toner, ran payroll, reviewed vendor contracts, and somehow still managed to onboard every single new hire like they were my own goddamn kid heading off to school. And when they offered me stock options back in 2002, I didn't laugh them off like the interns do now. I read the fine print, signed with a cheap ballpoint, stuffed the certificates in a fireproof box next to my expired passport and my ex-husband's dental records. Now here's a quick thing before we keep going. I know 93% of you just listen to these stories and never hit subscribe. That's fine. I get it. We all have commitment issues. But if you do like these kinds of stories, a quick like or a sub really helps the team keep digging up stories like this. Otherwise I gotta start charging for coffee machine repairs. Anyway, I never sold a single share. Most of the other early folks cashed out during the Series B or when the company moved into its first real office downtown. But I held. I'm not some genius investor. I just forgot they were there, and by the time I remembered, they weren't worth selling, but they also weren't worthless. Not really. Not once you add up the dilution math, board agreements, one little shareholder clause buried in an email from 2006 that most people probably assumed was spam, but I'm getting ahead of myself. For the last few years, things had changed. New leadership came in. People started saying things like move fast and disrupt legacy processes without ever once asking why the processes existed. Gavin was the 3rd CEO in 4 years. Slick hair, slicker shoes, that toxic combo of MBA confidence and zero domain knowledge. He called me Debbie for the first 2 weeks. Then Darla. Then he just stopped addressing me altogether unless something was broken. I wasn't surprised when he stopped inviting me to strategy meetings or when he reassigned my team under central ops. I wasn't even surprised when he took credit for workflow I designed in 2013 that cut vendor processing time by 40%. I was surprised when I opened the company newsletter one Tuesday morning and saw a headline, "Strategic Evolution, Preparing for Our Next Chapter." It was a press-friendly way of saying we were getting acquired. A $150 million private equity merger finalized pending board and shareholder approval. Big payout for Gavin and his cronies. PR buzz, new logos, rebranding, probably a new tagline like empowering the future of cloud. And not to mention, no legacy nod, no recognition for 20 years of blood and spreadsheets. Just a footnote in the transition plan, operational responsibilities will be consolidated under the new incoming COO. That's when it hit me. I was already gone. They just hadn't told me yet, but I wasn't angry. Not then. I just printed out the newsletter, folded it in half and slid it into the back of my fireproof box right behind the stock certificates. Something was coming. I could feel it. I just didn't know how deep they'd dig their own grave trying to bury me. They called it a quick alignment chat. You know the type? Calendar invite at 4:58 p.m. on a Friday. No agenda, subject line in lowercase like it's a damn Instagram DM. I almost didn't go. Thought maybe they wanted me to pick up balloons for someone's birthday or explain how to fix the office printer again. But I went, as I still had that reflex. The good soldier twitch. Conference room B. Gavin's already there, leaning back like a villain in a mid-budget Netflix drama. Beside him is Jenna from HR, who once used synergy and vibes in the same sentence during a harassment training. She's holding a manila folder like it's radioactive. "Dana," Gavin says with the forced warmth of a hostage negotiator, "we really appreciate everything you've done for the company. Truly, 2 decades, that's a hell of a run." The folder slides across the table. "We're heading in a new direction. You understand, streamlining ops, embracing agility. It's not personal, it's just evolution." I don't say anything. Not yet. I open the folder. Standard boilerplate, termination letter, NDA, severance breakdown, Cobra pamphlet, and here's the kicker, a waiver of shareholder rights, tucked right in like it belongs there. I flip back a page. "This clause," I say, pointing without looking up. "This isn't standard." Gavin shrugs. "Legal insists. Clean exits make for clean transitions." It's symbolic, mostly. I mean, he laughs like we're old college buddies. Those shares won't even buy lunch once the merger goes through. Let's just say, we're doing you a favor, cashing you out at all. Jenna giggles like someone just complimented her purse. I glance at her, then back at the waiver. I've seen a lot of documents in my time. Contract addendums, vendor red lines, lease terminations. I can tell when someone's trying to bury something in boilerplate. This waiver wasn't casual. It wasn't even about me, really. It was about something they were afraid I still had, something they needed off the board before that merger ink dried. I set the pen down, neatly, deliberately. I'll need time to review, I say. Gavin leans forward, flashing that wolfish, fake compassion look he uses in company all hands. Course, we just need everything wrapped by Monday. To keep things smooth, he thinks he's being generous. I close the folder and slide it back across the table. He looks surprised, off script, like the teleprompter just cut out mid-speech. I won't be signing anything today, I say, and I'd prefer any further communication go through counsel. Silence. A weird kind of silence. Jenna stops mid-smile. Gavin's eyes flick to her, and to the corner of the room like he's scanning for the next cue card. You're not disputing the terms? I'm not discussing them at all, I reply. I stand, straighten my blazer. Walk out without looking back. No tears, no dramatic speech. Just exit, stage left. By the time I hit the parking garage, the numbness is gone, replaced with a low hum. Suspicion. Maybe. Instinct. Something in that waiver wasn't right. It wasn't just legal paranoia, it was desperation dressed as policy. And desperation leaves a trail. When I get home, I don't go for the wine or the remote. I go to the hall closet, dig past the tax returns and broken umbrella and pull out the old fireproof box. I haven't touched it in years. The clasp still sticks. Inside, paper. Real paper. Pre-digital, pre-cloud, pre-Google Drive. Original option grants, shareholder memos, email printouts. One from 2006 labeled Q2 Board Addendum, Voting Rights Revision. I don't read it yet, just sit there with it in my lap because something's off. Gavin wanted that signature too much, and I've learned painfully that when a man like Gavin says something is just symbolic, it's never symbolic, it's critical, and I still have the pen. I didn't sleep that night, not from anger, not even from shock. The thing that kept me up was numbers, percentages, voting rights, dilution math. My mind was chewing through years of paperwork like a dog with a bone. Slow, focused, unrelenting. By 6:00 a.m., I had a pot of stale coffee, a floor covered in manila folders, and the faint scent of old toner hanging in the air like ghost perfume. I was wearing my ex-husband's flannel shirt and socks that said "World's Okayest Employee," which felt either ironic or prophetic depending on the lighting. I hadn't looked at this stuff in ages. Last time I pulled out my shared documents was probably before Obama got elected, but I kept everything. I always have. Because the thing about being underestimated your whole career is you learn to document everything. Paper trails are a quiet woman's armor. The stock certificates were yellowing at the edges, but still legible. 2002, 2004, 2005. Early days. The kind of option grants they don't hand out anymore. Back when no one believed the company would last a year, let alone 2 decades. Then came the memos, board minutes, printouts from email chains. Half of it was jargon. The other half was gold. Especially one document dated June 9, 2006. Amendment to Shareholder Agreement, Minority Veto Protections. I remembered that meeting. The CFO back then, Dinesh, was worried about hostile takeovers, pushed for a clause that gave early shareholders veto power if their combined voting bloc crossed a certain threshold. Back then, I had maybe 0.5% of the company. A courtesy. A thank you for being the only person who knew how to operate both the fax machine and the CRM. But most of the early crew cashed out over time. Some got bought out during the Series A. Some traded voting rights for liquidity in 2012. I had clauses expire when they left without cause. And me, I'd never sold, never waived, never transferred, just held quietly for 20 years. I took out a notepad, started doing rough math. My percentage wasn't massive, but once I factored in the dilution of sold shares, the expired proxies, and the fact that I was still technically listed as a class, a legacy holder, I hit the threshold. I qualified, not as a majority, but as a blocker. A firebreak. According to that dusty clause, I had veto power over any material corporate transaction, including merger, acquisition, or liquidation, should my voting percentage, either individually or collectively, exceed the class of floor established in 2006. I triple-checked. The numbers added up. Barely, but they did. I leaned back, heart suddenly loud in the room. Gavin hadn't just tried to cut costs. He'd tried to eliminate an obstacle. Me. He knew, or someone in legal did, that I was a problem for the merger. That's why the NDA had the hidden clause. That's why Jenna looked like she was trying to keep from vomiting when I slid it back unsigned. They needed me to waive my rights because they had to. Without it, the whole deal stalled. That's why Gavin smiled too wide. That's why he called them worthless shares with just a little too much glee. He knew damn well they weren't. I stood, Walked to the window, watched the neighbor's dog take a dump in my azaleas. For once, I didn't care. The betrayal, it hurt, not because I expected loyalty, hell, this was corporate America, but because they didn't even bother to lie well. After 20 years, I was reduced to a line item, a liability, something to quietly erase with legalese and a cheap severance. They thought I'd sign and disappear, but they forgot who the hell they were dealing with. I wasn't the assistant anymore. It was the shareholder they couldn't afford to ignore. The first email came Monday at 9:03 a.m., subject line, gentle reminder, exit package review, nothing gentle about it. HR Copa pasted some blurb about finalizing your transition experience and attached the same waiver I'd already declined to sign in person. I deleted it. At 11:47, a second email, this time from someone in legal I'd never met, Jason with a Y. His message was longer, less emoji, more menace. He referenced potential implications for pending corporate actions and suggested further delay may introduce complications. Translation, sign the damn paper or we'll make it messy. I didn't respond to that one either. Tuesday, Gavin called. No email this time, just a straight-up ambush via phone. I watched the caller ID light up as I was microwaving leftover meatloaf and considered letting it ring. Then I thought, let's hear what he sounds like when he's nervous. Dana, he said, too bright, too cheerful, just wanted to touch base. Thought maybe there'd been some confusion with the documents. No confusion, I said, slicing into the meatloaf. A pause. Well, look, I get it. Transitions are hard, but dragging things out helps no one, especially you. You really don't want this to turn into a legal issue. His tone dipped just enough. He was offering a handshake while tightening piano wire with the other hand. I'm not dragging anything out, I said, I'm reviewing thoroughly. He chuckled. Come on, Dana. I mean, it's not like those shares actually mean anything. Not anymore. I let that hang. Silence makes men like Gavin sweat more than shouting. Anyway, he finally said, if you want to save yourself some legal headaches, I suggest we wrap this soon. You don't want to burn bridges, right? Ended the call mid-sentence. He followed up with a text. Let's be adults about this. Don't ruin a good legacy with stubbornness. I blocked the number. By Wednesday, they were in full smear mode. An old colleague forwarded me a screenshot from the internal Slack. Someone in sales asking, what did Dana even do all day? Another thread speculated I'd been let go for performance misalignment, which is HR code for we needed her gone and couldn't be bothered to fabricate a real reason. The part that really got me, someone called me robotic, said I didn't even cry when they told me that I just left like it didn't matter. Funny thing, if I had cried, they'd say I was unstable. If I'd shouted, I'd be bitter. If I stayed calm, I'm cold. The only winning move is silence. So I stayed silent, except with one person. Thursday morning, I walked into a beige office above a dry cleaner in a strip mall and sat across from a woman named Nina, mid-50s, sharp eyes, sharper tongue, corporate law, 20 years. Her office smelled like old wood and quiet vengeance. I handed her the folder. She flipped through it, once nodded and said, they're screwed. That was it. No dramatic speeches, no lawsuit threats, just quiet confidence. Do nothing unless I tell you, Nina said. They'll panic first. Let them. Panic they did. Friday, another email from legal, more aggressive this time. They claimed my failure to engage could be interpreted as bad faith, that I might be in breach of contractual obligations. Nina drafted the reply herself. It was 2 lines. Ms. Carlton has not waived any rights. Further communication should be directed to counsel. We sent it. Then we waited. Meanwhile, Gavin and his little circle of yes-men were chewing their nails to the quick. Could imagine him pacing in his glass office, refreshing his inbox, wondering why the woman who used to refill the toner now had a lawyer with a spine and receipts. They didn't know yet what I knew. That the clause in that dusty shareholder agreement wasn't some technicality. It was a fuse, and Gavin had just lit it with his own arrogance. The first sign of trouble came from someone they hadn't bothered to intimidate yet. 20-something junior associate from the acquiring firm's legal team buried somewhere in a spreadsheet the size of a phone book. Her name was Harper, and she had the kind of detail-oriented anxiety that makes junior lawyers burn out before 30, but uncover gold before they do. She was in charge of the shareholder ledger review, a dull, thankless job, usually skimmed over unless someone's lawyer tells them not to. Which, lucky for her, someone's lawyer had. Harper spotted the problem around 11:15 a.m. on a Thursday. She was halfway through confirming cap table percentages and cross-referencing proxy agreements when she hit a snag. One Carlton, Dana E. listed as a class of shareholder with legacy privileges, but no proxy on file. No waiver. No consent. And the merger docs, currently in version 8, all assumed unanimous legacy consent had been obtained. Harper double-checked. Then she triple-checked. Flagged it with her direct report, who told her to bring it up with a senior counsel handling the merger integration. That's when things got weird. By 3:00 p.m., the acquiring firm's lead counsel was in a conference call with Gavin, the CFO, their internal legal director. And someone from outside counsel who billed by the hour and talked like his Bluetooth was surgically embedded in his skull. Gavin, true to form, dismissed it out of the gate. "Oh, Dana," he said. Probably with that fake laugh he used at company mixers. "Yeah, she was part of the old guard. She's been off-boarded. Her shares are dust. We've got her exit paperwork. It's just not processed yet." But then legal piped in. "I'm looking at the docs right now," their director said, voice flat. "There's no signed waiver, no proxy, nothing to revoke her class of rights." A pause. The CFO, who'd been sipping from his Camelback water bottle like a nervous pelican, stopped cold. "Does that mean?" he asked. The answer came not from Gavin, but from the acquiring firm's side. "It means," Harper's supervisor said carefully, "that your deal memo, your valuation assumptions, and your closing timeline all depend on a shareholder who still holds a legal veto over this merger, and she hasn't agreed to any of it." Gavin chuckled. One of those tight, clenched laughs men use when they know they just stepped in something, but aren't sure how deep the pit goes. "He doesn't know what she has," he said. "Maybe," the CFO replied, not sounding convinced. "Even if she does," Gavin continued, "she won't use it. She's not that type." She was quiet, weirdly quiet, probably embarrassed. These people don't have leverage, they just have grievances. But even he didn't believe it, because I had been quiet, too quiet. No threats, no angry emails, no dramatic post on LinkedIn about toxic cultures or my truth. Just silence. Nothing terrifies a man like Gavin more than a woman who doesn't scream. Just documents. By Friday, the CFO was starting to sweat. He requested a private update from legal, who confirmed Dana Carlton still held just over the threshold for veto under the 2006 amendment. They tried to find loopholes. Maybe the clause had expired. Maybe her shares had been diluted into irrelevance. Maybe they could rush a vote and claim it retroactively. Every option came up dry. The clause was still active. Her voting block was intact. Her refusal to sign wasn't a delay. It was a loaded gun on the boardroom table, and she hadn't even pulled the trigger. Nina, my lawyer, texted me one sentence that day. "They're flailing. Say nothing." So I said nothing. I watered my plants. Took a walk. Bought myself a fresh stack of file folders, because mine were starting to fray at the corners. Even reorganized my kitchen junk drawer. All while Gavin paced boardrooms and CFOs canceled golf plans to review voting rights clauses from the Bush administration. No emails from them now. No more gentle reminders. Just pure, simmering panic spreading through the veins of their precious little merger. I hadn't lifted a single finger, but the fuse I'd let them light, it was getting real close to the dynamite. Email hit my inbox at 6:12 a.m. on Monday, like Gavin thought striking early would catch me off guard. Subject line: clarification and closure opportunity. You could smell the flop sweat through the screen. It started with a fake sincere tone. "I hope this note finds you well in this time of transition." Like he was sending condolences for a dead hamster. Came the gaslight drizzle. "We're surprised and disappointed by your lack of engagement. It's important we all act in the company's best interest. There may be consequences for withholding consent in a manner deemed obstructionist." Obstructionist. That was the word he landed on. After 20 years of service, after building half the damn processes they were still using, Gavin had reduced me to a speed bump. He closed with a flourish. "Let's resolve this amicably and professionally, for we're forced to consider more formal action." Formal action. The man really thought I'd crack at the threat of legal bills, like I hadn't already hired someone who could eat his counsel alive before breakfast and floss with their billing statements. I didn't reply. Nina did. Her response was 5 words long. "Our client declines to respond." That same afternoon, the CFO tried a different flavor of manipulation. He called Nina directly, bypassing me completely. Kind of Hail Mary play men like him keep in their back pocket when the script isn't working. He opened with a casual tone. "Look, we're just trying to keep this clean." Then offered what he called a consulting transition bonus. Translation: shut up and go away money. It was generous. Low 6 figures. A number most people would have jumped at just to avoid the storm. Nina put him on speaker so I could hear it live. "Miss Carlton can simply sign the updated waiver, accept the bonus and move forward in a constructive way," he said. "This doesn't have to be adversarial." Nina smiled like a woman watching a toddler try to pick a lock with a fruit roll-up. "Let me be clear," she said. "My client doesn't accept hush money. She's not here to make this easy. She's here to ensure her rights are respected, every single one." There was a pause. You could hear the CFO recalculating in real time. Then came the guilt trip. "Dana always supported the company. This is her legacy too, isn't it?" I took the phone off mute just long enough to say, "Tell him I support the company, not the clowns who came in late and think they can rewrite the script." Click. That night, someone from HR sent over a final version of the exit paperwork with a bright red banner at the top that read "Last offer expires in 48 hours. They still didn't get it. This wasn't about money. It was about being treated like a disposable cog in a machine I helped build from duct tape and dreams. About watching men like Gavin piss on the foundation and call it innovation. About being erased because I didn't smile enough, Didn't shout in meetings. Didn't repost their motivational link in garbage. I didn't respond to HR. I went back to my files. I sharpened my receipts. There was a line in that 2006 clause they'd clearly overlooked about shareholder consent being non-transferable and irrevocable unless explicitly waived in writing. They thought they could bait me with guilt. They thought they could scare me with legal noise. They thought they could buy me, but I wasn't for sale. Not now, not ever. Let them dangle their merger like a carrot in front of Wall Street. Let Gavin start prepping his yacht speeches. Let the CFO stare at spreadsheets wondering why numbers don't feel like insurance anymore. Because the clock was ticking and the only signature that mattered wasn't theirs. The emergency board meeting was called for 9:00 a.m. sharp on Thursday. The invite subject line was sterile. Shareholder item review and resolution. But every person in that room knew damn well what it really meant. It meant me. They booked the big conference room this time, one with the skyline view and the long walnut table that always smelled faintly of lemon polish and broken promises. Gavin was already seated at the head. Tie loosened like he thought it made him look battle-hardened instead of panicked. The CFO sat to his right, flipping through a printed agenda he probably didn't understand. The company's legal counsel flanked the left side of the table. All frowns and MacBook chargers. At the far end were two stone-faced suits from the acquiring firm, their expressions somewhere between annoyed and entertained. At exactly 8:59, the door opened. I walked in first. No dramatic pause. No slow clap soundtrack. Just quiet heels on hardwood and a neutral expression carved from granite. Behind me, Nina. Calm, composed, wearing a dark suit and that slight smirk she reserves for people about to learn a very expensive lesson. Didn't bother to greet anyone. Didn't sit. Didn't even look Gavin in the eye. Nina walked to the acquiring firm's reps, placed a single black folder on the table in front of them, and slid it across without a word. Inside were exact, chronological records. My original equity grants from 2002 through 2007. Shareholder meeting minutes acknowledging classes status. The full 2006 clause, with notarized amendments. Information of my holdings exceeding the veto threshold. Zero evidence of any waiver or proxy ever issued. Gavin cleared his throat. Twice. Then finally said, "This seems unnecessary. We're here to clarify, not escalate." One of the PE guys flipped through the folder, page by page. He stopped halfway through and looked up at Nina. "Is this everything?" he asked. She nodded once. "Everything that matters." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. Could feel the oxygen evacuating the room as it dawned on everyone that this wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was a reckoning. The acquiring firm's senior counsel leaned toward Gavin. "Why wasn't this disclosed in the data room?" Gavin's voice hitched. We assumed she was a non-factor." "The shares. She's not employed anymore. We terminated." Nina cut in, ice cold. "She's not an employee. She's a shareholder. You stripped her of titles, not power." CFO suddenly found something very interesting in his lap. The internal legal counsel started flipping through her own notes like she could somehow summon an alternate reality. "Regardless," Gavin tried, "we can work around this." "There's always room for no," said one of the PE reps flatly. "There's not. You told us you had unanimous consent from all legacy shareholders. You don't. This is a material misrepresentation." And just like that, the power flipped. Didn't gloat. Didn't blink. Just stood there like a ghost they tried to bury who came back with a filing cabinet. They all looked at me now. Finally, after months of being erased, minimized, talked over, talked about, they looked at me like I was radioactive. And I said nothing. Because I didn't need to speak. My documents were speaking for me. My silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Every ignored email. Every forced smile in the hallway. Every time Gavin called me Deborah instead of Dana, I'd let it stack like cordwood. And now the match was lit. The PE firm closed the folder slowly, like it was a bomb with a timer they just realized they couldn't stop. "Until this is resolved," their GC said, "the deal is frozen." Frozen. Gavin's face twitched. The CFO rubbed his temple. One of the board members let out the quietest sigh I've ever heard in corporate America. I finally turned toward the window. View was the same as it had always been, steel glass ambition. But this time I saw it for what it was. Fragile. They tried to write me out, but they forgot something fundamental. You can't delete what you don't control. The meeting reconvened an hour later, but the energy in the room had shifted like a barometric collapse before a tornado. Gone were the confident smirks, the startup lingo, the backslapping optimism about next-gen synergies, how it was just legal pads, dry mouths, and a clock ticking like a metronome counting down to the implosion. The acquiring firm's general counsel, Miss Elridge, a woman with cheekbones sharp enough to slice ambition, stood at the head of the table, holding my black folder like it was an indictment, which in many ways it was. "We've completed our review of Miss Carlton's shareholder status," she said, her voice as smooth and merciless as granite. Everyone looked up. "She holds 3.14% of current class's shares, uncontested. Per the 2006 shareholder amendment, Any class A holder meeting or exceeding 2.75% retains veto authority over material corporate transactions, including mergers. She snapped the folder shut. Miss Carlton has not waived that right. This merger cannot proceed without her written consent. Silence, again. But this one didn't feel strategic, felt like oxygen had just been outlawed. Gavin coughed into his fist, leaned forward like a man about to bluff with a 2.7 offsuit, and said, "Okay, but look, she was terminated. She's no longer part of the company. She's residual. Residual." He actually said that word, like I was a stain on the carpet they forgot to clean before the open house. Elridge didn't blink. She's not an employee. She's a shareholder. That distinction is critical. She's not aligned with our vision anymore. Gavin tried again. How can we allow a, frankly, obsolete stakeholder to derail a $150 million deal? The CFO turned away like he didn't know the man. Elridge paused, then delivered the line that cracked Gavin in half. "You made her more powerful when you fired her." She let it sit. No rush. No drama. Just a scalpel of truth slid right between Gavin's ribs, removing her operational duties and stripping her of executive status. She continued, "You inadvertently severed her from fiduciary obligations, meaning she no longer has any duty to act in the best interest of the company. She's free to act solely in her own interest now. You gave her that freedom." I almost smiled. "Almost." "Wait," Gavin said, looking around like a man who just realized the fire alarm wasn't a drill. "Saying she can hold this deal hostage because we let her go?" "Yes," Elridge said. The other acquiring exec, a graying man in a navy suit who hadn't spoken much up to now, leaned forward and added, "We relied on your due diligence. You misrepresented the cap table. That's not just a procedural hiccup. That's a breach of trust." Gavin opened his mouth, but no words came out. For a moment, I thought he might actually cry. Not because of guilt. Because of the math. Because his 7-figure bonus just evaporated. That was supposed to make him a tech world demigod now hung on a woman whose name he couldn't even remember correctly last quarter. "Deb Dana," he stammered, looking at me for the first time in months. "Come on. You don't want to blow the whole thing up. Be reasonable." I met his eyes. "Define reasonable," I said, because I remember being pretty reasonable when I asked to attend the last 3 ops meetings and you said the room was too full. I was even reasonable when you called me Deborah in front of the board. He flinched. "You treated me like I didn't exist." I said, "Now I don't. Not in your structure, not in your hierarchy, but in the cap table. I'm very much alive." Board chair, who up until now had been sitting in statuesque silence, finally spoke. "What do you want, Miss Carlton?" The question wasn't loaded. It was respectful. I looked down at the stack of papers Nina had placed before me earlier, untouched, unread. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd built an empire on disruption and speed, but all it took was one forgotten clause and a woman they deemed invisible to bring it all to a halt. I didn't need revenge, had leverage. They gave it to me when they assumed silence meant surrender. They gave it to me when they thought terminated meant to fanged, and they gave it to me when they let a man like Gavin steer the ship straight into an iceberg of his own ego. The bomb hadn't just dropped, it had been ticking for months, and now it was time to negotiate terms. I didn't say anything right away. When the board chair asked what I wanted, half the room leaned forward like it was a trick question. Like I was going to demand something absurd, vindictive, theatrical. Maybe Gavin White imagined I'd demand his parking spot or insist on being named chair emeritus of Post-it notes. But I wasn't there to humiliate anyone. I was there to correct the record with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Nina slid a single-page memo across the table. My terms written plainly, no fluff. No legal poetry. First, a revised payout structure allocating a separate tranche for legacy shareholders. Those who built the foundation, held their equity through the volatile years and didn't sell out for lattes and ping-pong tables. It wasn't just for me. A few others still had scraps of skin in the game. If this company was going to be reborn under private equity, it would damn well do so without erasing its bones. Second, the immediate cancellation of Gavin's golden parachute. Oh, bonuses. No exit package, no post-merger consulting retainer. He could walk out with his standing desk, an inspirational quote mug, and that's it. Third, a formal board-issued statement acknowledging my contributions and confirming that my departure was not performance-based, disciplinary, or voluntary, just so the narrative couldn't be rewritten later by someone with a louder microphone and worse memory. The room sat with it, haven't let out a breath that was meant to sound amused but came out strangled. "This is extortion," he muttered. "You're blackmailing your own company." "No," Nina said, steepling her fingers. "She's negotiating as a shareholder." "You made that distinction yourself." Remember, Gavin's face turned the color of printer jam. "Absolutely not." He snapped. "You're asking me to throw myself under the bus. No one asked you to stand in the road." I said. The board chair scanned the memo, slid it toward the acquiring firm's reps. The older one read it, then turned to his colleague and said, "This is doable." Gavin exploded. "You can't just cave to this. She's hijacking the deal. She's protecting her stake," the CFO said, eyes still on the memo. "You should have done your homework." Gavin stood, palms on the table. "You all realize what precedent this sets? We're letting a former operations director rewrite the terms of a $150 million transaction." CFO leaned back in his chair, looked at Gavin like he just asked where the sun goes at night, and said, "It's this or nothing." You could hear the hinge on Gavin's ego crack right then. He stared at me like I was a ghost. "No. Not a ghost, a glitch, a flaw in the plan that refused to be debugged. I didn't smile, didn't twitch, just stared back with that same quiet neutrality I'd worn through every office birthday party, every team-building exercise, every casual feedback session where he tried to replace process with pep talks. The acquiring firm's GC tapped her pen. "We'll move forward with these revisions," she said, and just like that it was over. Nina handed me a fresh copy of the merger approval form, now with the legacy compensation clause inserted, Gavin's bonus redacted, and the official board addendum clearing my record. I signed it, one clean signature. Then I stood, collected my folder, just did my jacket. Before I left I looked Gavin in the eye, and said softly, "Good luck cashing your bonus, Gavin." The color drained from his face and I walked out. No fanfare. No applause. No smug nods. I didn't need validation. I had my terms, I had my dignity, and I had the one thing none of them could ever take back: proof that I was never just an employee. I was the fireproof safe they built the company on and then forgot existed until I opened it. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.